All right, friends, welcome back. Glorious, glorious day today. Uh, most Shiny tutorials I've seen, including videos with many thousands of views, assume you already know a decent amount of web development concepts. Maybe you don't know the programming language, but you kind of understand what the goal is. This video is geared for people familiar with R, but unfamiliar with Shiny and the web. The goal that you ought to consider as you watch is that Shiny apps are meant to update values of R objects in response to inputs provided by the user. Most of Shiny revolves around that heuristic. So all Shiny apps require a UI, a server, and a call to Shiny app, UI and server. Uh, any regular R code, you can include that in a Shiny app. That's fine and well. Just be sure to place it somewhere toward the top of the app. I think it'll bug out if you put it in the UI, and I think if you put it in the server function, it's just going to run every time the server updates, which, well, that's a lot of unnecessary computation and will probably slow down your app depending on how egregious the thing you're reading in or loading takes, how computationally expensive it is. Anything you want to load in once, just throw before you start any of the actual Shiny app. So let's go back to the UI. The first thing we consider before starting work on your app is the layout. I suggest you get a piece of paper and draw out the way you want your app to look. Before writing any code for my Wordle solver, this lovely thing here, I prototyped the layout on just a note card. Actually, I'll pull that up for you. Here it is. Yeah, there it is. So, you can see resemblance is striking. I have my colors over here. I have the title, the best word to use, a plot, the word plot right here, and the remaining possible words. I left that as just a rectangle because I knew that would be a table. This is actually the most important part of your uh, workflow, because if your app is hard to use, all your work will be in vain. If it's not easy to use, there's a nail in your coffin. You lose your sales, you lose your customers, and you'll be trying to understand why no one likes your beautiful creation. All of that is to say, you need a good idea of the final product before starting to work on it. But once you've figured out how you want your app to operate, you'll create the UI. So the UI begins with a page function. If you want your app to have tabs, you'll use navbar page. If you want just one long continuous page, you'll use fluid page, and so on. All of your user interface code goes inside of a page function. Within the call to your page function, you can reserve space on that page to place inputs or outputs. You can create these partition sections with a panel function. So, for example, a sidebar panel, which corresponds to this lovely guy over here on this left-hand side. That's the sidebar panel. Now, to clarify, you'll have one call to a page function that creates the app's UI, to allow you to specify where on a page to place outputs or widgets. Widgets are these things here, things that allow users to provide input. You'll have to reserve part of the page with one or more calls to a panel function. Or maybe fluid row, some equivalent. In this app, I used a sidebar panel and a main panel. Those were the two partitions of the fluid page that I created. So again, within this reserved area of your web page, inside the panel function, you can place both inputs and outputs. Pay close attention to this part because it specifies how users interact with your app. All the input functions take the name of the input as the first argument. In the app you see in front of you, you see the example like text input. So I named it guess. This call does two things. First, it takes, it places a little text box on the web page where the user can input a value. That's what, that's what this does. And second, by naming the input, I can use the value that the user supplied in calculations within the server function. So I can refer to the value that the user input by this ID. So the case is similar for output functions. All we need to do is provide a name for the output. Just this time, the values to show in the output are supplied by the server function and not clicked on by the user. So again, we'll just name our output, and that's how we refer to the output in the server. At this stage, that's all you really need to worry about for a UI. Remember the goal. Where do you place the inputs? Where do you place the outputs? Let's move on to the server. Notice that the server is just a regular function this time. It's not some fancy, strange, shiny function, or function from the Shiny package. You can think of the server function as the function that gets called over and over again within your call to Shiny app. You access the inputs the user supplied from the UI by using list syntax on the parameter named input. This guy here. Think of this as a list, and each input that's created, action buttons are inputs as well, or radio buttons are also inputs. Think of these as the names of the elements of your list, and you access them by using input $reset, input $guess, input $color1, or you could use the angled brackets with quotes. That's how you would access those values in the server function. So variables that are not part of the output but get updates based on changes to the user's input get wrapped in a call to reactive, or some equivalent like reactive values. Any variable defined by reactive has to be accessed like a function for use within the server. That's because the values keep changing. It can't just be a constant value. For example, reactive, I specify the combo, the color combo. All these guys, gray, 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 green, green, something like that. I put them all together and say, this is our combo. This is what we're working with. And to use it, it's accessed like a function. So these guys continually update as the user inputs values, and then the combo updates whenever it's called. It'll return whatever all of these are when you call combo. The next question you should probably be asking yourself is, when do I want my values to update? For example, whenever I click on a button here, you obviously just want this to update immediately, but I don't want the entire, I don't want to start updating new scores when I haven't completed, even inputting my word yet. But in other cases, you might want to update your values immediately. You can use an observe function to, basically decide when you want your values to update. For example, I used observe event, so anytime someone clicks the update button, which is this guy right here, the app will run this code. There are a few different variants of the observe functions, like maybe you don't want it to update when this happens, maybe it's some combination of events, or maybe it's when you reach some value. But just know that the question of when you want to update the values of your objects is an important thing to do. Observe event is usually an easy thing to do because it's just saying, all right, update everything after you click this button. The last part you want to consider is, how do you display your output? Well, to do so, you assign the return value of a render function, render plot, render print, render table, and so on, to the element of the output parameter. So remember, it's that list with the the named list with the corresponding to the names of your outputs. You supply values to that using a render function. So output $next best guess. So remember output, think of that as a list, and we have an output here named next best guess. So output $next best guess. Great. And I said that was verbatim text output. And here it's a render print. So you're going to have corresponding render functions to your output functions. Yeah, so you would say cat. You would print out whatever the value is here, and that will be what gets displayed on the app up top. So that's Shiny. That's I mean, there's a lot more you need to know. There's a lot more to it than what I've shown you, but you should be able to get up and running fairly easily. So just decide how you want your app to look, then kind of reserve space in the UI for the inputs and outputs, and then do some calculations with the inputs to have reactive outputs. That's really the goal of Shiny. If you like what you saw, let me know. If you didn't like what you saw, sorry, waste your time, but please do let me know. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. I know this channel gets flooded with comments, but I'll do my best to get back to you. Happy hunting.